Hey, I'm Buster. Welcome to Buster's Mind. Today we're tackling the complex reality of forced group membership. Focusing on the Hitler Youth during World War II. For many German kids, joining wasn't a choice. It was a legal requirement, with harsh consequences for refusing. We'll look at how even future leaders and artists, like a pope and a filmmaker, were swept up in this. Not by conviction but by compulsion. We'll also explore how this pattern of coerced affiliation appears in other contexts. To political youth movements. Understanding these stories means looking past labels and seeing the pressures that shaped young lives. This is about the difference between willing participation and unavoidable compliance. If you're ready for a nuanced look at history, stick around. And consider subscribing for more deep dives. Let's rewind to Germany in the 1920s and 30s. The Nazi Party didn't just want power, they wanted to reshape society starting with the youth. The Hitler Youth began as a voluntary group, but by 1936 it was the only legal youth organization. By 1939, membership was mandatory for nearly all German kids aged 10 to 18. Refusing to join wasn't just frowned upon. It could mean harassment, loss of jobs for parents, or worse. For families, the choice was stark: comply or risk everything. The organization was split by age and gender. Boys joined the Deutsches Jungvolk or Hitlerjugend, girls the Jungmadelbund or Bund Deutscher Madel. Activities started innocently, camping, sports, but were laced with Nazi ideology, racial purity, anti-Semitism, and absolute loyalty to Hitler. As war escalated, so did the demands: collecting scrap, air raid duties, and for older boys, pre-military training. The Hitler Youth wasn't just an after-school club, it dominated young lives, replacing family and religious authority with the party. Non-members faced bullying, exclusion, and lost opportunities. For most, joining was about survival, not belief. Even those who disagreed with Nazi ideology had little choice but to comply. The psychological toll was immense. Kids learned to hide their true thoughts, to wear a mask, and to survive in a world where authenticity was dangerous. When we talk about Hitler Youth members, especially after 1939, we must remember, for most, it was a legal obligation, not a personal endorsement. The system left almost no room for dissent. Understanding this context is crucial before judging individuals who were swept up in it. The Hitler Youth was a tool of state control, not a club you could simply walk away from. The pressure to conform was relentless, and the cost of resistance was high. For many, it was a matter of survival. The story of the Hitler Youth is one of coercion, not just enthusiasm. It's a reminder of how totalitarian regimes target the young to secure their future. The reality was far more complex than simple allegiance. This is the backdrop for every personal story that followed. Let's look at Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, as a case study. Born in 1927, Bavaria Ratzinger's family was devoutly Catholic and quietly anti-Nazi. His father's opposition led to demotions and harassment. In 1941, at age 14, Ratzinger was compulsorily enrolled in the Hitler Youth by law, not by choice. Refusal would have endangered his already scrutinized family. Ratzinger was a reluctant member, often skipping meetings and focusing on his seminary studies. His religious path gave him a worldview at odds with Nazi ideology. Local Hitler Youth units varied, but Ratzinger's involvement was minimal. He even received a partial exemption due to his seminary enrollment. Later, he was conscripted into an anti-aircraft unit, like many teens as the war dragged on. In 1944, he deserted the German army, a dangerous act that showed his lack of commitment to the regime. Critics have pointed to his Hitler Youth membership, but the context tells a different story: legal compulsion, family opposition, and personal disengagement. Ratzinger's experience highlights the difference between forced compliance and true belief. Millions of German youths face the same dilemma: comply or risk everything. His story is a reminder that history is rarely black and white. Choices were limited and survival often meant outward conformity. Ratzinger's reluctant passage through the Hitler Youth was a product of circumstance, not conviction. Judging him or others without context misses the reality of life under totalitarianism. His story is about navigating impossible choices, not embracing a hateful ideology. It's a powerful example of how appearances can be deceiving. Forced membership left scars, but it didn't define his beliefs. Ratzinger's life shows the complexity of growing up under coercion. It's a lesson in empathy and historical understanding. Now let's turn to filmmaker Werner Herzog. Born in 1942, Herzog grew up in a remote Bavarian village, largely shielded from the war's direct chaos. He said he was briefly a member of the Hitler Youth, but given his age, any involvement was minimal, likely just a bureaucratic formality. The war ended when he was 3, so if he was ever enrolled, it was as a very young child, with no real participation or understanding. Herzog himself downplays it, emphasizing the compulsory nature and his total lack of engagement. For kids in remote areas, membership might have meant little more than a name on a list. His later work, full of outsiders and rebels, reflects a spirit at odds with enforced conformity. Herzog's story shows how the Nazi regime tried to register every child, even in the farthest villages. For him, it was a fleeting, meaningless entanglement, imposed by adults, not chosen. This contrasts with Ratzinger, who was older and more directly affected. Herzog's case highlights the absurd reach of totalitarian ambition. When you hear Herzog was in the Hitler Youth, remember, it was compulsory, and for him, utterly empty of meaning. It's a reminder that biographical details without context can mislead. Herzog's life and art were shaped by independence, not indoctrination. His membership was a footnote, not a defining chapter. Even the most creative spirits can be caught in the machinery of history, but that doesn't mean they were shaped by it. Forced group membership isn't unique to Nazi Germany. We see similar patterns in cults and political youth movements worldwide. Take destructive cults like the Children of God kids born in, with no say, raised in closed, high-control environments. Critical thinking is suppressed and questioning is punished. Isolation from the outside world keeps members trapped in the group's ideology. Leaving is traumatic, especially for those who've never known another life. In China's Cultural Revolution, millions of young people became Red Guards, sometimes out of idealism, but often under immense pressure. Not joining could mean being labeled an enemy with devastating consequences. The pressure to conform was overwhelming, and dissent was dangerous. These groups use propaganda, peer pressure, and punishment to enforce loyalty. The result: young people robbed of agency, shaped by forces beyond their control. The psychological impact can last a lifetime: identity struggles, trust issues, and trauma. We see echoes in the recruitment of child soldiers, 2 kids forced into violence, stripped of childhood. The common thread: powerful groups exploiting the vulnerability of youth. Understanding these patterns helps us see the Hitler Youth in context, not as an anomaly, but as part of a recurring human tragedy. The methods change, but the dangers of coercion remain. Recognizing this is key to protecting future generations. What happens to those forced into group membership as kids? The scars can last a lifetime. Psychological trauma is common: anxiety, guilt, and a fractured sense of self. Kids forced to act against their beliefs often struggle with identity long after the regime falls. Trust is another casualty. When authority betrays you, it's hard to trust again. On a societal level, entire generations can be marked by forced indoctrination. Post-Nazi Germany faced the challenge of denazification. How to rebuild when so many were swept up by force? It's vital to judge individuals with empathy, recognizing the pressures they faced. Many were victims, not true believers. This doesn't excuse real crimes, but it demands nuance. Some survivors go on to become advocates for human rights, using their experiences to warn others. Education, teaching critical thinking and the history of propaganda is key to preventing future abuses. Today, extremist groups still target youth, often online. The lessons of the past are more relevant than ever. Forced affiliation leaves deep wounds, but also stories of resilience. History is lived by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Our job is to understand, learn, and protect the freedom of future generations. Only then can we hope to break the cycle of coercion. Today, we've explored the realities behind forced group membership, from the Hitler Youth to cults and political movements. Figures like Ratzinger and Herzog remind us, context is everything. History isn't simple, it's full of people navigating impossible choices. Understanding coercion doesn't excuse wrongdoing, but it does demand empathy and vigilance. Freedom of thought and association is precious, never take it for granted. Thanks for joining me on Basta's Mind. If you found this valuable, like and subscribe for more. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep thinking.